y'all, this is Avery Carl. Today, we are going to talk about how to optimize your short-term rental in 2025 and what the investor housing market in terms of buying your next short-term rental looks like for the near future.
Welcome to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owners Association, where real estate investors have found success since 1968. I'm your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group. This episode is sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com. And RCB & Associates, helping real estate investors and small business owners navigate the complex world of health insurance and Medicare benefits at rcbassociatesllc.com. Get ready for the Midwest Real Estate Investor Conference in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Join hundreds of real estate investors for networking, learning, and growth. Be sure to mark your calendars for April 24th and 25th of 2025. Hello and welcome to episode 473. Short-term rentals can be a great path to financial freedom, but they also come with challenges that can derail even experienced investors. Knowing how to approach this asset class strategically is critical to success. My guest today, Avery Carl, is the CEO of the Short Term Shop and one of the nation's leading experts on short-term rental investing. In her new book, Smarter Short-Term Rentals, she provides a deep dive into the operations of short-term rentals, how to strategically analyze and choose markets, and offers actionable advice on managing properties, no matter the size of the portfolio. Today, we'll explore insights from her book and discuss what it takes to build a successful short-term rental portfolio. Avery, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Last time you were here, you kind of gave me the 101 on short-term rentals, like what they are, how they work. But that was pre-COVID, I believe, and things really took off after COVID, and then now they've kind of come back down to earth. So what is your view on the state of short-term rentals right now?
So I would like to take a quick second to differentiate the type of short-term rentals that I buy in and recommend for people to buy, just because there is some misconceptions around that. So I only buy in vacation markets, things that probably would only ever be a vacation rental or a vacation home, no matter who bought them. So what I recommend doing is buying vacation rentals in vacation markets and not going into like affordable neighborhoods that your grandmother might be living in and buying things and converting them to short term. So I just wanted to give that caveat real quick. But so the short-term rentals have been on quite a ride since COVID. I think that short-term rentals in metro markets and suburban markets and areas like I just mentioned that I avoid have really taken a tumble because, people were really looking at them as like an alternative to long-term. Like, oh, hey, I've got these long-terms in Kansas City. Let me convert those to short-term and see if I can make more money. And you could at the height of things. But for that exact reason and more that I'm going to talk about is the areas that I invest in long terms are completely different markets than the areas that I invest in short terms. And I think if you're strategic about choosing the right market for short terms, like beach markets, mountain markets, national park markets, things like that, those types of markets have stabilized. So, everything shot up and kind of came back down a little bit, but those vacation markets are still on an upward trend where the metro and suburban markets that have a lot of primary homeowners, those areas have seen, I would say kind of a rise and fall. You've got a lot of anti-short-term rental regulations in areas like that now. So I think that the areas where short-term rentals have always been a thing since well before Airbnb, since before the internet existed. So like I live in Destin, Florida now, big vacation town. My grandmother has been coming and everyone else's grandmothers coming and renting vacation rentals here since the 30s. So areas that have those really, really huge track records, I think are the areas that you want to stick to be successful. But, the cool thing about real estate investing is you can be successful in a lot of different ways.
What are the specific areas you are investing in when it comes to short-term rentals?
For me personally, I have 5 in the Smoky Mountains in Tennessee, so Pigeon Forge, Gatlinburg area. And then I have another 3, almost 4, about to go under contract on 1, spread out along the panhandle of Florida. So the Destin area, 30A, which is right next to Destin, and then the Forgotten Coast, which is the Cape San Blas, Port St. Joe, Mexico Beach area of Florida. The short-term shop has 20 markets. So we help investors buy in 20 different markets, but they're all markets like this. So we've got obviously offices here in the Smokies, Myrtle Beach, Outer Banks, North Carolina, Orlando, where Disney is, coast of Texas, Broken Bow, Oklahoma, like tons of Branson, tons of areas like that.
In that portfolio, talk about pre-COVID and then during COVID when, just the roller coaster ride. During COVID, it was like a few months of nothing, and then everything took off into the stratosphere, and now it's come down. Talk about how that's really played out in your portfolio.
I have 3 units that I've owned since 2015 and 16, so well before COVID. Those units during COVID, one of them's a studio. The other 2 are 1 bedrooms with extra loft bedrooms. So we rent those as 2 bedrooms. During COVID, those units did, I think the highest they did was like around 85,000 each for the 2 beds. And then I think 75,000 for the studio. And now those are doing about, the 2 bedrooms are doing about between 75 and 80, and the studio is doing about 65. So it's come down some, but I want to zoom out. I'm really glad you asked this question. So yeah, if you're looking at from only 2020 to 2024, you see a little bit of a dip. And actually this year we're up just a little bit from last year. So a little bit of a rise there. But if you zoom out and look at what the numbers look like from 2016 to 2024, we were doing 45,000 each on the 2 bedrooms back then, and we were happy to get that. So when you look at 2020 to 2024, it looks like, oh my God, it's the Airbnb bust, it's a crash. But if you zoom out, it's just a blip. We're still on a way upward trend, almost double what we were happy to get, back in the day, well before COVID. So there's still, I think, a lot of room to run with vacation rentals, but you have to look at the bigger picture and not just the COVID to now.
What are you noticing out there, like as far as the investor appetite to buy short-term rentals? Because there does seem to be a lot of headwinds that people are talking about. Is that deterring new investors from coming in, and does that create opportunities?
Having offices, real estate offices in 20 different markets, all different types of markets. I don't know if your listeners are aware of this or not, but 2023 and 24 are the worst housing market we have ever seen, period, in recorded history. Worse than 2008. Now, the difference is 2008-9 prices went down. So it looked different, but more homes were sold in 2008-9-10 than 2023 and 2024.
When you say the worst housing market, you mean in terms of the number of homes that were sold during that period?
Yeah. So fewer homes were sold in 23 and 24 than the history of the housing market. But the big crash everybody was waiting for was with prices, and that didn't happen. The reason for that is because we still have a shortage of homes. So to answer your question, not only are investors not buying due to headwinds of buying houses, primary homeowners aren't buying. Nobody wants to buy when the interest rates have tripled it really only took them about 6 months to triple, maybe a year. But they're not coming down. So you've got a lot of wait and seers. You got a lot of people who have the money, but just don't want to do it right now because they want to wait and see. They want to wait and see what the rates do. They want to wait and see. The big wait and see was the election 2 weeks ago. So nobody's buying anything is the case. So in terms of being an investor, though, whether you're buying short term, long term, or whatever, that presents a huge opportunity. Like I personally am under contract on 1 property, about to have a total of 3 properties under contract because there's nobody competing with me. I got $75,000 off a $600,000 property yesterday. Because there's not a lot of offers going around, properties are sitting, you don't have a lot of competition. Whereas 2022, you were competing with 100 different offers on every single property. Now you have breathing room to negotiate, see who really wants to sell, see who's willing to give you a deal and get those deals. And you want to make sure that they work at the interest rate you have now. So I'm not telling you to buy a deal that doesn't work at these bad interest rates and then refinance later, hopefully. Find something that works good enough now. And in a few years, when rates go down, which they will, they have to. At the end of the day, they have to. It's just we don't know if it'll be tomorrow or 10 years from now. And refinance then, and you'll be able to add a little bit of cash flow back but it's rough out there for everybody who's trying to buy or sell a house.
What advice would you give to an investor who, in the past 3 or 4 years bought a short-term rental? Maybe it's not in one of the markets that you're in, but they're struggling and trying to differentiate themselves from the competition. What would you say to them?
The decor really does make a huge difference. So, and that's something that in 2022 kind of didn't matter because everybody was dying to get out of their houses and book non-hotels and stay away from people, but still get away. So you could get away with not having an updated place. You could get away with bad pictures and things like that. But now you really do want to make sure that your place is updated, no carpet, that you've got, depending on where it is, you might have different aesthetics that you're going for, but having it updated and really, really great pictures are the key. I preach, I beat into people's heads, pay for professional photos. That's really the most important thing that you can have, because you can have a mediocre property, but if it's got really good photos, you're going to get clicks and you're going to get, which is going to result in bookings. If you're not getting clicks because your pictures suck, you could have the best house in the world and you're not going to get bookings. And I would say 60% of the people who come to me and sign up for our listing advice calls where we help them figure out why they're not getting booked, 60% of the people took pictures with their iPhone and think that it's fine. And it's not. And they're like, well, iPhones have, I've got the 16 Pro Max and it's got the best lens. That's great. Me too. But I'm not the best photographer. I don't have the experience. I don't know the angles and the lighting. So pro photo is really important. And be honest with yourself about your pricing. So I see a lot of people who, they call it revenue management in this industry now. Really, it's just pricing on your calendar. They get this number in their brain, which you need to know, your break-even number. What price per night do you need to make to break even on all your expenses? Okay, that's an average. And I'll see people who will not lower their prices, even in the worst times of the year, to lower than that number, which just because you lowered it to that number once does not mean that you have to stay under that number the rest of the year. There's a lot of seasonality involved in short-term rentals. So people will let their properties sit empty during shoulder seasons or low seasons where you can actually make a good bit of money. You'd be surprised how much you can add to your annual income during the shoulder seasons just by pricing appropriately. But they get so hung up on that number and they won't go below it that they'll sit empty for 3 weeks when they could have had, 10 to 12 days of that booked, which is a significantly more amount of money than zero. So being honest with yourself about pricing, just because you went below your number here or there doesn't mean you're there for the rest of your life. You have to work off of averages.
When you talk about working off of your number, what goes into that number? I think you said that's your break-even number. Talk about that a little bit so people understand, what is the number they should have in their head when it comes to their short-term rental?
The most important number when it comes to short terms is your annual break-even number. So what is the number that I need to gross each year annually in order to pay all of my expenses? And then you can backtrack and say, okay, what's my monthly number? What's my price per night? But I want to tell people to be careful with looking at things on a monthly basis, just because seasonality again. So it doesn't matter where you are, unless you're in Phoenix, you're going to be making a ton more money in June than you are in January in most markets. So if you're analyzing monthly, when January rolls around, you're going to be screwed because you're not going to be making that income to pay those expenses. You're going to have to pay that out of the rest of the year's expenses. So that's why I like to say, look at everything annually, because seasonality can really mess with your analysis when you're looking at things on a monthly basis. But really, your break-even number is the amount you need to gross each year in order to pay your expenses on the property. So that's your mortgage, utilities, all that.
I'd like to take a moment to tell you about Green Property Management. Not only do they manage everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area, they also manage my entire portfolio. So I can tell you from personal experience that their unique flat fee management style is worth a closer look. If you feel that your property isn't operating to its fullest potential, then Green Property Management can help you take a holistic approach that will save save you money, eliminate your headaches, and increase your net income. And if you're a property manager interested in applying Green Property Management's model, give them a call at 1-866-95-GREEN or visit them on the web at greenpropertymgt.com. If you're thinking of leaving your W-2 job and becoming a full-time real estate investor, one of the greatest costs you must consider is healthcare for you and your family. When I made this transition myself, I found the whole healthcare insurance process to be confusing and frustrating. That's why I'm glad I met Chad Creasy at RCB and Associates. Chad is a professional health insurance agent who helps real estate investors and small business owners understand and choose their best healthcare options. And best of all, his services are covered by the insurance company and won't cost you a dime. If you live in Michigan and are expecting a change in your healthcare insurance coverage for any reason, or losing employer coverage or transitioning into Medicare, then you owe it to yourself to contact Chad Creasy at rcbassociatesllc.com. Save the date for the Midwest Real Estate Investor Conference happening April 24th and 25th of 2025 in Grand Rapids, Michigan. This event is the perfect place to connect with fellow real estate investors, gain valuable insights, and elevate your real estate game. With a lineup of expert speakers and numerous networking opportunities, you won't want to miss it. So are you making the argument that during the shoulder season, it's okay to lower your rate to below that break even?
Yeah, because you're in the high season, you're going to be charging way over your break even number. So that's going to even out. And there are instances where it doesn't matter how low you go, you're not going to get booked in the low season. And you have to understand that before you buy about your market. And I've got a whole soapbox on that I'll get into in a minute. But for example, I've got a 3,500 square foot 4-bedroom property in Destin. Our high season is March to October. I am not going to be able to book a big property like that in January because people just don't come to the beach in January. But you might be able to get a 1-bedroom condo for snowbirds, coming down from Michigan, Canada, cold places that I don't like to go. A smaller property, you might be able to. But the big soapbox that you've now led me to is the most important thing when it comes to investing in short-term rentals is truly understanding your market. So many people will just look at these lists that these data companies put out every year. So like Vacasa or AirDNA will have top 25 best places to invest in vacation rentals. And they have no context. So people will just run off and buy things in markets that they're not familiar with. They don't understand who comes there, why, what parts of the market are better or worse in terms of performance. For example, there's a market right down the road from me called Navarre Beach. And Navarre Beach is interesting because it's like a peninsula, like a cape almost. And there's Navarre proper is the mainland. Then there's a big bay, which is very dark water. And then there's Navarre Beach, the little cape out in the ocean, the Gulf, which is where people go. People go to vacation in Navarre Beach because it's got the crystal clear Caribbean water. Well, that shows up on every list of best places to invest. People will have come to me and said, "Hey, I bought in Navarre Beach. What's the problem? I'm not renting. Can you take a look at my investment?" 98% of the time, people bought in Navarre proper on the bay water, which is basically black because we have a lot of tannins in the soil around here. And so the lakes and then the bays are like brown, like coffee brown. They're black out in the middle. And I'll say, "Well, you bought on the bay." And they'll say, "Well, people come to vacation for the water, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, but not this water, the other water, the Gulf water." And when you only look at the numbers and they see, okay, well, the numbers on the bay, the properties are really cheap. And 4 bedrooms in this market make X amount. I'm going to buy the cheapest 4-bedroom and I'm going to make the most money. And that's just not how it works. So you can really get yourself in trouble with relying too much on the spreadsheets and the data and not taking the time to understand the intangible parts about the market. Like, oh, these two bodies of water are not the same. The tourists don't go to that part of the market. They come down to this part of the market. So that's kind of been my soapbox for the last year and a half, because people will, and there's now like guys who've popped up who are really good at spreadsheets, but most of them don't own any properties and will say, "Oh, the numbers look best here, buy there." But they don't take into account all of those things that you learn from owning real estate, like, well, just buying in the cheapest place, in the cheapest part of the market, usually means that's probably not the best place for your guests to be driving by in terms of you getting good reviews afterwards, things like that. So the data is great. We need it. We got to have it. But you can't get so caught up in spreadsheets that you forget about these are people that are making subjective, emotional choices, and they're not following your spreadsheet.
How would one then go about getting the real on the ground local perspective that should supersede the data and the numbers?
When you go to buy a short-term rental, start with a market that you know, like somewhere you've been as a tourist. And if the regulations are favorable and you can find a great agent, then great. But if you truly don't have that, there's not we see a lot of people from California who are like, I don't really want to do this in California. I've been a lot of places in California where I might be familiar, but I don't want to do this. The second best thing you can do is find an agent who really, really understands the market from a short-term rentals perspective. And I don't mean just go call an agent off Zillow and ask them if they do short-term rentals. The answer to that is always going to be yes. Nobody's going to turn away business. Same thing with lenders. So when you're shopping for agents, you want to ask them, see if they own any of their own short-term rentals. And that's okay if they don't, but it really does help if they do. Ask them how much of your business last year was short-term rentals versus primary homes. Because I almost made a huge mistake earlier this year. I was going to buy something in a market that I was not familiar with, that I didn't have any agents in. And I found an agent who had worked with a client of mine. And I thought, oh, well, if they're good enough for my client, they're good enough for me. That was not the case. I did not vet him the way I should have. And they got us under contract on something that was in the best part of town to live, but not the best part of town for a vacation rental, because the traffic going through town to get up to the ski slopes in the wintertime was insane. So we were looking to buy on the south side of town. Really, we needed to be on the north side of town. We had no idea the traffic was going to get the way that it does. So again, that's why you need to have either some experience with it as a tourist, or you always need to have an agent who understands the markets that you're buying in as a short-term rental investor. And that can be hard to find. It can take going through a couple to find somebody who really does know. And, I would make sure to get recommendations from other investors who've actually worked with this person, whether it's an agent or a lender or a handyman, whatever. You always want to be taking recommendations from people who have actually worked with that person. I see on Facebook groups all the time, people will get in there because, there's local Facebook real estate investing groups for just about every market now. And somebody will say, oh, I need an agent in this market. And then 20 people will comment this same agent. And then you look and all of those 20 people work for the same company as that agent, or they're their wife or their brother or something. So just make sure you're taking recommendations only from people who have used that person in the capacity that you plan to.
Let's talk about marketing. I mean, you talked about the importance of pictures, but what about the platform? Are you just using Airbnb, or do you use all the different platforms? And if so, what's your PMS system?
We use Airbnb and Vrbo. There's a lot of people who get really into Facebook advertising and things like that. I think that can work in very, very niche markets. But if you're in I call them mega markets like the Smokies or Panama City Beach, Florida, or Scottsdale, you're really not ever going to be able to put as the amount of marketing dollars that you need to as one person to compete with the exposure that an Airbnb or a Vrbo will give your property if you're doing it right. So you got to have Google Vacation Rentals is kind of starting to be a thing. We've gotten a few bookings from there. I think if Google doesn't put that down and they keep moving forward with it, that'll be something that everybody needs to make sure that they're on as well. Booking.com, they're trying to kind of make a comeback. They do really well in Europe, but in the US, for some reason, they don't. And I know they're working on that. We're not on there for that reason. We have been in the past. But Airbnb and Vrbo is 99% of our bookings. So if you've got the good photos, you're in the right location and the right decor, then you're at the very least going to get eyeballs. If you're getting eyeballs and getting clicks but not getting booked, then it's your pricing.
So it's that simple.
To me, yes, but they're when you're new, it can seem like a beast to be tamed. So I'm not trying to make light of that for anyone.
Vrbo, Airbnb, just sticking with those for a second. I agree with you. Photos are primary. You got to have great professional photos. But how else do you work with Airbnb and VRBO to really sell your units? I mean, is it copy? Is there some sort of positioning that you leverage? I mean, how do you maximize Airbnb and Vrbo?
Your copy is extremely important, specifically your headline. So when you're scrolling through each of those platforms or when a guest is, or when you're scrolling through to rent one, you're looking at the pictures and the headline is right there. You can't see any of the rest of the copy until you click into the listing. So we've already talked about the importance of pictures. Headline is really important. The biggest mistake that I see is everybody likes to name their property like a cute name. And like, I get it. Like we name all of ours classic rock song related things that have to do with the market that they're in. But people waste that headline with the cutesy name that they came up with, which at the end of the day, your guest does not care about. Your guest wants to know important things like location. You don't need to put how many bedrooms it has because that will be listed on there as well. But maybe if you're in New Orleans, like walk to the Superdome, or which New Orleans doesn't really allow short-term rentals. So I'm not sure why I use that analogy, but the most important thing that about your property that you want people to know that they can't see from just looking at the picture needs to be in that headline. So don't waste the headline with the name of the property or how many bedrooms or bathrooms it is when that is already showing. Use the headline to say like, oh, private pool, or, something that they're not going to be able to see. That's very important. That will make them click on it. So for me, I've got young kids. So if I see private pool or something like that, I'm going to be like, oh yes, I need that or big backyard, because we got to have something to do during that downtime and let the kids run around and burn off some steam. So use that real estate wisely on the headline.
It seems like that's getting at really understanding what is the value of your property, what is the main selling point of it, and making sure that that's right in the headline. So I'm wondering, like with the people that you help, maximize their listings, what do people tend to overlook? Like if you're on the water, you want to say what, water view or water access? I mean, where have you seen people not really understand what they're really selling?
So many times, especially in beach markets, people will have their main photo, we call it their hero photo, be a picture of the beach. And the guests know they're going to the beach. That's what they know, the beach is there. And so if you're not on the beach and it's not a shot off of your deck where you can see you are sitting at the property, you don't need to lead with a picture of the beach. Everybody's got access to the beach. You need to lead that photo with something about the house that's pretty. So people will mess that up quite a bit, or lead with photos of amenities of the complex rather than the actual house. Or, we see in the Disney market, people lead with the Disney fireworks. Yes, people know that's why they're booking. They know they're coming to Disney World. They want to see the accommodation. So they'll miss with that. If you've got a mountain view, that would be something that I would make sure is in the headline. I'm trying to think of if people really have any big misses. It's really, I think, more of showcasing the market instead of the property when, your guests already know what the market has. That's why they're coming.
Let's say you have a property, a house that's not really that impressive, but it's in an impressive location. So you wouldn't necessarily want to lead with a photo of your unimpressive house when you're really selling the location. Maybe the interior is really nice. So what do you do in that situation?
You really do just have to, you can't get away with not having a nice property. So if you're not going to work on your property to make it as nice as it can be, so like if you've got an outdated kitchen or outdated bathrooms or carpet, or it's dark, you really do have to figure out through decor, even if you're on a budget, ways to fix that. And we use what we call the enemy method at the short-term shop, which is basically like a competitor audit. Look at the other properties in your market that when people that are the same bedroom count as yours, that when people are scrolling Airbnb and Vrbo, are going to be the other properties that they're looking at, and look at what they look like compared to what yours looks like. Well, if they all look terrible, then you don't have to do as much to look better, but you want to always make sure that your property is a little bit better than all of the other properties in your market. And there's going to be things that you can't fix. So if your neighbor has a view and you don't, well, you've got to compete in some other way, whether that's through amenities or price or size of the house, game rooms, things like that. You have to kind of use the enemy method to figure out what you can do to make a guest book your property instead of your competitors.
If you visualize the photos that you have, you hire a professional photographer, they come out, they take amazing photos. What order do you usually like to put those photos in? So when someone is looking at your property, they see this first, this second, and maybe the toilet last or something. I mean, how do you like to order your photos?
We do change the order of our photos weekly because whatever that front photo is makes a difference. So I would like to have my guests walked through the general flow of the house in the first 10, 15 photos. And then, the tiny detail pictures after that. So like, you're right. You don't need the picture of the toilet up front, but you want them to see the main important things. So the common living space, the kitchen, the backyard, if that's important. You want them to kind of walk through those things and see what the bedrooms look like in a general sense first, and then do all the little detail-y pictures after.
Avery, what do you anticipate in 2025? I mean, we're recording this mid-November. The election's over, so we know who's going to be president. Interest rates seem to be going down, but up at the same time. I don't understand that. But what do you think 2025 is going to look like for investors, and what should they anticipate when it comes to their short-term rentals?
I think for now, we at least have at least 3 months of this opportunity of not having a lot of competition in the market to be able to get the good deals. I think we're going to see a slow uptick in competition because, like I said, I think that the markets are still, and I'm not an economist, so y'all don't listen to me, but I do pay as much attention as possible. But, the markets are kind of shocked with everything that's happened recently. So we started lowering rates and we got a new president and there's all these different things. But as everything starts to settle down, I do think we're going to see those interest rates start to slowly tick down. We're going to start to see people slowly jump back into the housing market. So I think that it should be better than 2024 and 2025, but I think it might just take a little bit longer to get to better than we were all hoping.
How would people find out more about you, get a hold of you, and please mention your book and tell people how they can find it?
Last time I came on, I just released my first book, which I think was at the beginning of 2022, or I think it came out in 2021 on Bigger Pockets Publishing. It's called Short-Term Rental, Long-Term Wealth, kind of a primer on how to buy and manage your short-term rentals. Got a second one coming out on Bigger Pockets Publishing in February called Smarter Short-Term Rentals, How to Outhost Your Competition. So it's going to be more of all of the kind of things we've talked about today, optimization, systems and processes, things like that, the kind of nuts and bolts to help you optimize what you already have, then how to teach you how to buy and manage one.
What's your favorite hack or app?
For short-term rentals, I'm going to have to say two of them. Hospitable and Price Labs are the two tools that we use the most. Price Labs is a pricing tool, and Hospitable is our property management software that kind of streamlines everything for us so that we don't have to spend as many hours in our business as we did years ago. Now we can work on the business.
Avery, thanks for coming back to the show to talk about short-term rentals. I really appreciate you kind of digging into the details today with me to just hopefully help our listeners out there with short-term rentals figure out how they can maximize their rents and their bookings. So thank you so much for having this conversation with us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Nice to see you again.
I want to thank everybody for listening to this episode. I'm your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group, and you can find out more about me by going to higinvestor.com. That's higinvestor.com. And you can also ask questions and join us on Facebook by going to RPOA, Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast. And remember to save the date for the Midwest Real Estate Investor Conference on April 24th and 25th of 2025 in Grand Rapids, Michigan. It's going to be an event you won't want to miss, packed with invaluable sessions and opportunities to connect with like-minded investors. Keep listening for more updates, and we look forward to seeing you there. This episode was sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com. And RCB and Associates, helping real estate investors and small business owners navigate the complex world of health insurance and Medicare benefits at rcbassociatesllc.com.
You've been listening to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association. You can find out more at rpoaonline.org. If you enjoyed this podcast, please go to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and review.